There is arguably no better feeling in fantasy football than when you land an absolute steal. You get my 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Dominator, which is jam-packed with strategy and analysis for 250-plus players. And he's been strong in fantasy football. He's averaging over 18 fantasy points per game over 25 career games where he's played at least 73% of the offensive snaps. 2025 Week Winner, formerly known as the Heat Map. So you can conquer start-sit dilemmas, find plug-and-play streamers, and dominate your weekly matchups with this one-of-a-kind resource Discord community, where you can get personalized advice from 180-plus and counting sharp fantasy football minds that are helping each other dominate. 365 days of elite fantasy football analysis, resources, and Discord community. What is up, my friend? Welcome in to episode, what, Tanner? 64? 64.
64.
64. I should probably do a better job of keeping track of this, but welcome, everybody. Episode 64, Inside the 20, Basement Brood Fantasy Football. I'm Mikey Henninger. Over there? No, over there? I don't know how this camera thing works, but we got Tanner Dawson, and as you can see, we are twinning today. We both are rocking the yellow BBFF shirts, completely unplanned, but I'm very happy that it happened. Tanner, man, how you doing this morning? 8 a.m. Are you ready to rock, or is the brain not working?
It's football day, so my brain's already working. My brain was working last night. I was putting in all my prop bets in, finalizing all my my fantasy lineups here, so I can get ready for this show because I was going through the week winner because I needed some help. So tell you that much.
Love it, man. We'll see how well the words flow out of my mouth, or not well that they flow out of my mouth today. We'll see. The coffee is not quite empty yet, so we're gonna see.
That's all we need. Let me pop a monster. We'll be set.
Yeah, man. Well, before we jump in, dude, let's talk. Well, we don't have to spend a lot of time, but how about the Milwaukee Brewers yesterday, dude?
Hey. Coming out of nowhere. What were they down? 6 or 7 to 2. And then I look up because I'm working on some stuff here. And I'm looking up and I'm like, we're tied. What are we doing? Let's go. Yeah. So can't count them out. Can't count this team out.
I took the family yesterday, wife, 2 kids, right? My son's 9, my daughter's 6. And after the Cardinals scored another run in the 9th inning, a bunch of people started to leave. And my daughter was like, can we go home now? And I was like, this is like peak dad moment. I'm like, no, I promise you, the people who are leaving this game right now are going to regret it. And sure enough, man, we tied it up in the 9th, went into the extras, won it in the 10th. It was awesome. It was very cool. Yeah.
And this solidifies a playoff spot for the Brewers. Solidifies a playoff spot for the Brewers.
Awesome, man. It was great. But now the brain is kind of hung over. I got to flip back into fantasy football mode. So if you're joining the show today for the first time, first of all, welcome in. We're excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Jordan. Holy cow. That's like 6 a.m.?
Yep, that's 6 a.m. That's 6 a.m. out there for Jordan in California. So thanks for getting up, buddy. I appreciate it. Hopefully you get yourself a nice cold brew. I know you prefer your coffee cold, which is weird. It's good, but warm coffee is the way to go. But if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. We appreciate you being here. One caveat that I want you to know before we dive in here. Clock, Jeff Rogers, if you guys are new to the show for the first time, if you're expecting this to be a quick hit, rapid fire, I answer a question really quickly and move on to the next one, this is not going to be the show that you're looking for. Instead, I'm very much a subscriber of a philosophy of I will not answer questions with my gut. You will never hear me give you an answer like, I really feel like this guy is going to have a good game. Instead, we are going to talk stats, data, facts. We are going to break down these decisions with as much analysis as we possibly can. And sometimes that takes a while. Okay. Other than that, I feel like there's one caveat that I'm forgetting, but again, the coffee hasn't hit quite yet. I suppose we can start diving in. Tanner, you got anything you want to mention?
No, hey, like, again, everything you're seeing is below here. And my Mikey, I don't know if you want to throw out the big news here for this morning.
So anybody who's watching, so one thing, I'm going to be sharing my screen. We're going to be walking through when we're making these decisions. There's a resource that I create and a resource that I use that Basement Brood Fantasy Football subscribers use called the Week Winner. And what that is, you'll see it in a minute, is actually it's an absurd amount of research and data and analysis for literally any player that you want or that you're considering for your lineup to help you conquer some of these tough start sit decisions, DFS lineups, prop bet decisions. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But if you are interested in getting access to the Week Winner for week 2, week 3, week 4, for the rest of the season, I have a promo code currently. The promo code is YouTube, all caps, YOUTUBE. So if you go purchase on wap.com/BBFF, the first 3 people that use promo code YouTube are going to get $5 off every single month permanently for as long as they're a member of Basement Brood Fantasy Football. So I think that's a good time for us to dive into the first segment or the first question. I don't know if you have anything queued up, Tanner.
I do. I got some stuff here. I even dropped one myself because I am a little, debate. Like on your Week Winner, you have both these guys in the good old green column. So that's startable column, and they're both marked with a blue dot.
Okay.
Which generally means
great problem
these guys are on the verge of being, you start them no matter what kind of thing.
Yep.
And it's hard to do, right? So my first question, and I'm going to throw out mine, guys, because I'm allowed to, and I help run the show. So
that's fair.
Jalen Hurts or Joey Burrow? Here's that's the question of the day here. This is full PPR. It's a 12-man. This is literally on one of my leagues, my biggest decision to make, actually 2 of my leagues, my biggest decision to make today.
All right. I got one. I'm going to start by asking you why you have both of these guys in a 12-team league.
Traded draft picks. So I didn't really have a lot in the back end of the draft here. I had a lot in the front 12 rounds because I traded some draft picks around. And when you're drafting 90% of your team in the first 10 rounds, you end up with some guys like this.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. Ultimately, I'll start out by saying you can't go wrong. This is going to be a great problem to have. In fact, I'll just tell you right before we even dive into the Week Winner that my answer is going to end up being Jalen Hurts, only because of the floor ceiling combo. He's got a much, much, much safer floor than Joe Burrow does, but a very similar ceiling. So that's going to end up being my answer. But if you want to dive into the Week Winner, we can certainly do it. It's up to you, man.
I think it'd be good to look, because this comes into, some situations on your Week Winner where you're looking between you're looking at first the columns, right? You go down the list of the columns. Now you're looking at the color of the dots. And then you do get into a situation where I'd like to see your perspective of, now we're not just looking at, we're not looking at just green and yellow dots here, guys. These are blue dots that could potentially get into that blue column that we all like to see. So I just see us. It don't have to be nothing spectacular. I just want to see what your breakdown would be here with those. So,
all right, let's share the screen. Let's hop in. All right, y'all. Oh, let me blow that up real quick. Here we go. It's getting a little bit better. All right, guys. So what we're looking at here, this is that Week Winner that we're talking about. This is a resource that I put together literally every single week. And on the left side, you're going to see every game, over-unders, spreads. You're going to see how each defense is performing against a very specific position. Really easy, quick cheat sheet that you can use when making some of these decisions, right? You're also going to, on the right side, you're going to see 5 different columns. Column A, which is the blue column. This is like, these guys are set to explode this week. The green column, which is, hey, all of the data suggests these guys should have pretty useful weeks. These are guys that you generally want in your lineup. The yellow column, which suggests, you know what, there's really nothing in the data that suggests this is going to be a big game, a bad game. It's just very meh. The orange column, which is the feel gross column, all of the data suggests that this one's just probably going to feel pretty gross. You're not really going to want this guy in your lineup if you don't have to put him in your lineup. And you can read what column F is. These are guys that I'm not considering for my lineup, but this does tend to be a pretty good list of players to keep an eye on, players to keep on your watch list. Now, as for Tanner's dilemma, right, we're talking Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow. Obviously, that's a great problem to have. I can't even believe that this is a question, right? I don't know how many fantasy football teams on the planet would have both of those guys, and there's not many scenarios where both of those guys are on your roster. Starting with Joe Burrow, right? He's in the green column with a blue dot, which means he's on the verge of breaking into column A. And when you click on that player's name, and we'll see how well this works since I have this super zoomed in, I'm treating Joe Burrow like he's a high-end QB1 with upside because this is a projected shootout, guys. This has a 49.5 point over-under. Both teams have very high projected totals. The Jaguars and the Bengals have above average projected totals. We're expecting plenty of touchdowns, plenty of fantasy football fireworks. I got Joe Burrow for about 17 to 21 fantasy points based on efficient passing. Upside for 24 plus if he stacks multiple touchdowns. Now, the one thing that I want to mention here before we keep diving into this is that Joe Burrow historically, or at least over the last 3 years, is a slow starter. I recently tweeted about his last 3 week 1 performances and how all 3 of them were like 7, 8, or 9 fantasy points. It's wild. He's averaging like 6.2 fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. If I knew this question was coming, I would have had that tweet pulled up. But if you really want to see it, you can go over on X and find it. But we talked a little bit about the game. We're feeling really good about it. The over-under at the time of this writing was 48.5. It's up to 49.5 now, which is tied for the highest among all 16 games on the week 2 slate. That tells us this is a game we want exposure to in our fantasy football lineups, in our DFS lineups. Both teams are sporting top 13 implied point totals. This is going to be a shootout, no shortage of touchdowns, no shortage of fantasy football fireworks. The Bengals in particular are scoring a very healthy 26 implied points. Vegas is expecting 26 or more, or 26-ish fantasy points from the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a very high implied total. They are a premier target in week 2. Now, Joe Burrow, I did actually put it in here. For a 3rd season in a row, Joe Burrow started his season in a painfully slow fashion. You can look up his stat lines anytime you want from week 1, but he continued the trend of pooping the bed in week 1 after scoring 3.2 points in week 1 of 2023, 8.1 points in week 1 of 2024, and then again in week 1 of this year, he scored 8.8 points. So it just hasn't been very good. But for what it's worth, he is averaging 16.4 fantasy points per game over the last 3 week 2 performances for Joe Burrow. And no, I don't usually do that kind of research, but I found it interesting that Joe Burrow starts week 1 super slow every single week. Or every single year. It's really weird. But you know the deal with Joe Burrow, right? This dude entered the season averaging 21 plus fantasy points per game across 52 career games when he has both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, the minimum being that he threw at least 20 pass attempts. So ultimately, if you roster Joe Burrow in your league, don't panic. Stay the course. He's going to be all right. Week 1 is just not his friend for some reason. Now, we know we want Joe Burrow in our lineups. We know that this is a game that we want to target, but ultimately, what about the matchup? Okay. Last week, the Jaguars got off to a hot start against Bryce Young. In week 1, they intercepted him twice. They held him to just 154 passing yards, which was the 7th fewest of all quarterbacks. Just 1 passing touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns, and ultimately Bryce Young ended the day with 10.1 fantasy points. Now, you can say what you want about Bryce Young. He did end the season on an absolute tear last year. Over the last, I forget off the top of my head, but 6, 7, 8 games, he was averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. So for them to come out and pretty much shut him down in week 1, that's a good start for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But you do have to take it with a grain of salt because last year's Jaguars hemorrhaged the most passing yards, 5th most passing touchdowns, 9th most rushing yards, and 4th most fantasy points per game. So there is a high ceiling here for Joe Burrow. The issue is the floor, right? Such a slow start last week. There's no guarantee that he's going to show significantly better just 7 days later. The floor is just going to be much shakier or much more shaky. This is one of those my coffee hasn't kicked in yet moments. I don't know if it's shakier or more shaky, but it's just going to be more shaky than Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts, I have a feeling we're going to talk about that last game a lot, Bengals Jaguars, but we're also going to talk about this game quite a bit. The Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl rematch. This one also projects as a possible shootout. Two very good offenses, very good, very healthy over-under of 46.5 points. Tied for the third highest among all 16 games. Both teams are sporting top 12 implied totals of more than 22 points. This is a Super Bowl matchup, rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs. It's projected to be one of the higher scoring games. No shortage of touchdowns, no shortage of fantasy football fireworks. Once again, just like Bengals Jaguars, this is one of the premier matchups that you want to target. Now, Jalen Hurts got off to a very Jalen Hurts start in week one. He completed 19 of just 23 passes, just 152 scoreless yards in week one, but he added 62 rushing yards, looked really spry when you look at the tape. 2 rushing touchdowns. Guy got you 24 plus fantasy points. It's just another day at the office for Hurts. He entered the season averaging 22 plus fantasy points in 72 career games where he throws 15 plus pass attempts. The matchup, you saw what Justin Herbert did to the Kansas City Chiefs last week. They were absolutely destroyed. They were dominated. Justin Herbert threw for 318 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 32 scoreless rushing yards. He got 27 plus fantasy points, and that's consistent with what we saw from last year's Chiefs. Sorry, Tanner. A unit that held quarterbacks to the 14th fewest passing touchdowns, but otherwise allowed the 16th most passing yards, 3rd most rushing yards, 9th most rushing touchdowns, and 7th most fantasy points per game to quarterback at 17 plus. Jalen Hurts is going to offer a very, very similar ceiling to Joe Burrow in this game, but the floor is just going to feel much safer. So it's entirely possible Joe Burrow outscores Jalen Hurts this week, but when you look at the risk reward and the safety in the floor, I'm going Jalen Hurts here and feeling pretty confident and comfortable about that.
It's kind of what I was leaning to. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't because I was a little bummed last week for my Chiefs defense. So
it's all right.
Let's make sure here. I appreciate that. That was a good breakdown.
It's not often you see Patrick Mahomes at home as an underdog. The Eagles are favored in this game in Arrowhead, which is weird, but here we are.
It's very weird. It's very weird, but it is what it is, right? Let's see here. We'll pop in here. We'll get a 2-person here. Jeff, we'll come back to your 3-person here in a minute. Let's pop into Jordan here. Jordan Mason or Tyrone Tracy in my RB2.
Jordan Mason or Tyrone Tracy. Let's see. We got Vikings, Falcons. That could be a fun game to target in fantasy football. But then you got Tyrone Tracy. There's a lot of red flags there. Let me pull up. All right, I got it here on the heat map, Tanner. Let's dive into this bad boy.
Do you want to get a word from our sponsor first before we?
Yes, we do got to do that.
Let's get that out.
Pop it. Yeah, let's pop it in there.
All right, here we go. Quick word from our sponsor, and we'll get into that question here.
Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A forge master? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us.
All right, guys, let's talk Jordan's question, which was Tyrone Tracy or Jordan Mason. We're trying to pick one of those guys. I believe he said PPR. Okay, he didn't specify PPR, but ultimately in this situation, it's really not going to matter. By the way, for the sake of time and trying to be faster with these answers, there's going to be bits and pieces of this that I skip. Like I said, any one of you that are watching or listening can get access to this. The week winner, week 2, I do it every single week. There's going to be a week 3, a week 4, week 5 version. You can grab access. Just head over to wap.com/BBFF. There's a link for you in the description of the show. And the first 3 people that enter promo code YouTube, all caps, they're going to get $5 off per month, every month for as long as they remain subscribed. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to start this thing off with Tyrone Tracy. Now, the game environment, what we're expecting from the Giants offense, it gets a little bit disgusting here for the Giants this week, at least. Now, they could surprise. Russell Wilson is still a plenty capable quarterback of keeping teams competitive, but the orange dot suggests that this is just not an environment that is conducive to fantasy football output, specifically for Tyrone Tracy. Now, here's the deal. The Giants have a bottom 6 implied point total coming into this week. When you look at all 32 teams in the NFL, the Giants have a bottom 6 implied point total. So we're not expecting many touchdowns. We're not expecting many fantasy football fireworks. If the Giants are going to get you fantasy points, they have to do it off of yards and catches if you're in PPR leagues, more than likely. This is more of an offense that you want to target with the Cowboys defense in week 2 than it is an offense that you want to squeeze into your lineups, of course, with some exceptions. If you have a guy like Malik Neighbors, you're putting Malik Neighbors in your lineup. Now, the unfavorable, at the time of this writing, the Giants were 6-point underdogs. That spread has actually come down a bit by 1.5 points. Last I saw, and I actually just updated this very recently. Last I saw, the Giants and it's down to 4.5. So the Giants are still underdogs, but it came down a little bit. 4.5 is not as scary of a spread as 6 points is, but it is still on that borderline of this game could get away from the New York Giants, and that's what makes Tyrone Tracy a risky play in week 2, is if the Giants do fall behind early, have to abandon the run game. There could be a spike in passing volume, which is great news, and theoretically should be great news for Tyrone Tracy, considering the guy used to be a wide receiver, but it just hasn't happened that way for Tyrone Tracy in his career. So if this game gets away from the Giants and they have to throw the ball, that's going to suppress rushing volume, and that's the red floor for Tyrone Tracy. Now, week 1, the campaign opened with a bit of a thud. He got 12 touches, including 2 catches on 4 targets for 35 scoreless yards. And again, this is the game, I believe the Commanders won, 21-6. So it was negative game script. The Giants were down most of the game, and he still only racked up 4 targets, right? So we'd like to see more if we're going to start banking on a PPR floor. Now, the usage for Tyrone Tracy, that's promising. That's a good thing. I wouldn't be selling Tyrone Tracy by any means. He played a strong 74% of the Giants' offensive snaps. He garnered 4 targets. That's a good start to the season. Cam Scatabo was a distant third. That won't be the case forever, but Tyrone Tracy's usage is in a good spot going into week 2. Yeah, we'll skip that part. Like I said, if you want to read this, you can get access to the week winner every time you want. Now, a lot of times in these divisional games, I like to look at how players have performed against those defenses in the past, at least in similar situations, right? If there's different offensive coordinators, different head coaches, different schemes, different target competition, rushing competition, some of those things don't really matter. In fact, it can actually screw with your brain a little bit. But in one career game against the Cowboys last year, where Tyrone Tracy handled more than 5 touches, which was in week 13 last year, he handled 11 touches, 2 catches on 3 targets, 65 scrimmage yards, and 1 touchdown. So he got you 14 plus PPR points in basically his only game against the Dallas Cowboys. That's a good start, but take it with a grain of salt, right? We're talking one game, teeny tiny sample size. The Cowboys did all right. They were okay in their first matchup of the season against running backs. They allowed Saquon Barkley and company to compile 96 rushing yards, which was the 10th most in football, 1 touchdown, 4 catches, which was the 16th most, 24 receiving yards, which was the 14th most, and ultimately 22 PPR points, which was the 14th most. So they look like an above average matchup, but they also went against Saquon Barkley. And all things considered, if you're holding Saquon Barkley to the 14th most fantasy points, that's not too bad. But it was pretty on brand for what we've come to expect from the Dallas Cowboys. Last year's Dallas Cowboys held running backs to the 10th fewest catches, but they otherwise allowed the 16th most rushing yards, 8th most rushing touchdowns, 6th most receiving yards, 16th most receiving touchdowns, and ultimately the 13th most PPR points per game. Very average, very mediocre. There's nothing that's terrifying about going up against the Cowboys defense, especially without Micah Parsons, go Pack go. And there's nothing that's exciting about going against the Dallas Cowboys defense. It's just very mediocre. So there's not anything that screams great or bad matchup for Tyrone Tracy. The usage is great for Tyrone Tracy. The big red flag for Tracy here is the quote unquote game script or game environment where the Jaguars or the Giants could get scripted out of it. Now, as for Jordan Mason, this thing is so zoomed in that it's like kind of hard for me to, here we go. As for Jordan Mason, okay, we're treating him like a low end RB2 with a solid rushing floor. I'm pegging him for, oh God. Oh man, I really wish I didn't just use that phrase. That's going to get cut up. I have Jordan Mason pegged for 9 to 13 PPR points on 13 to 17 touches. Upside is 15 plus PPR points if he can find the end zone. Now, the game environment, you'll see we got a green dot here as opposed to an orange dot for Tyrone Tracy. This is a good environment for Jordan Mason. The Vikings are entering week 2 with a pretty solid implied point total, 24 points. That's above average. It's the 9th highest total among all 32 teams that are playing football this week. The solid implied score suggests a fair amount of touchdown opportunities for the Vikings offense, plenty of possibility for fantasy football fireworks. Ultimately, this is an offense that you want exposure to in your week 2 lineups. Now, Jordan Mason himself, very, very promising usage in week 1 for the cost that he was drafted at in fantasy football drafts this year. He played 54% of the offensive snaps. He handled a team leading 16 touches. He had more touches, more playing time than Aaron Jones. Okay. 75 scoreless yards, so 8.5 PPR points, not particularly active in the passing game. He only had 1 target and 1 catch. That role is going to belong to Aaron Jones. So the risk with Jordan Mason is that he's going to have to butter his bread with rushing yards and touchdowns, right? So ultimately you're banking on a touchdown for Jordan Mason, or he could bust. That's the risk for Jordan Mason. But he did play ahead of Aaron Jones in terms of snap share, in terms of touches. He very much operated as the team's first and second down type of back, and potentially the goal line back if he gets that opportunity. Now, the Vikings are entering this game as 3.5-point home favorites, and that's a good thing. That suggests, at worst, neutral game script. The Vikings should have a balanced offensive approach. If the Vikings do get ahead and start to run away with it, that turns into a positive game script, and Jordan Mason is the guy who's going to get the bulk of the carries as opposed to the catches. All of that's a good thing for Jordan Mason. It makes him a low-end RB2 with a little bit of upside if he can find his way into the end zone. Now, the matchup itself, the Falcons got off to a mediocre start against Bucky Irving and Buccaneers running backs. They allowed the 10th most catches and a receiving touchdown, but they otherwise held Buccaneers running backs to the 10th fewest rushing yards, 5th fewest receiving yards, and 15th fewest PPR points. Very mediocre, very average. I don't know why that's in there. Let's get rid of that. It's pretty consistent with last year's Falcons, by the way. Last year's Falcons were tough on running backs in the ground game, so that's not necessarily a good news for Jordan Mason. They did hold running backs to the 10th fewest rushing yards and 3rd fewest rushing touchdowns, but they were a wide open window for pass catching running backs. They allowed the most running back catches, 15th most receiving yards, 3rd most receiving touchdowns, and in the end, they ultimately held enemy running backs to the 14th fewest PPR points, 10th fewest touches, 10th fewest scrimmage yards, 10th fewest touchdowns from scrimmage per game. Of course, you do always want to take last year's statistics with a grain of salt, especially when it comes to defenses, because there's a lot of turnover, there's schematic changes. If you look at defensive fantasy scoring year over year, it's wild. It changes every single year. So you want to take that stuff with a grain of salt. Ultimately, what's most important to me in week 2, because it's still early in the season, at least when it comes to a running back decision like this, is the big difference in the game environment. This game is just much more conducive for Jordan Mason to rack up touches than it is for Tyrone Tracy to rack up touches. The hope for Tyrone Tracy is always going to be that he racks up catches, but that just hasn't happened in his time as the Giants' #1 running back. This one's close, in my opinion. It's not the sort of thing where there's a clear winner or an obvious answer. If it's me and I'm setting my lineup, I'm putting Jordan Mason in there and hoping for a touchdown. But I would say it's like 55-45 Jordan Mason over Tyrone Tracy. One last caveat, especially if it's not PPR. If I know there's very few leagues these days don't offer some sort of reward for catches, but if there's no reward for catches, then I'm definitely going Jordan Mason here.
Yeah, no, it sounds like, it really is a toss up there. And because the Cowboys too, you do have a streamers tab on the week winner, and the Cowboys are one of the top 5 streaming defenses this year on that week winner. So that's, just in general, it's going to be tough for Tracy and the Giants offense, I think. So.
Yeah, the Cowboys they're tied for a top 6 spots on defensive streamers this week. So it's just not a good environment for the Giants. You know, the Vikings are The Giants are underdogs and not expected to score a lot of points. The Vikings are favorites and expected to score a pretty good amount of points. So I'm going Jordan Mason here and just hoping he finds his way into the end zone.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows here, like we're live on Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever you call it nowadays, YouTube and Twitch here. But we also have our Discord community questions out there that you can also join, that you also get access here. WAP.com/BBFF here. You get the week winner and you get the Discord access where we have great questions that pop in, and also people that in that Discord that help answer those questions and help, relieve a little stress on your lineups day to day. So we do have those questions as well, and I'm going to try to bounce back and forth here. All right, so just brace with me here as we keep going. Let's pop in here to another Discord question here. Olave versus Myers. Jacoby.
Olave versus Jacoby Myers. Okay. I like it. Let's talk about that one. But before we do, let's give a little love to our new sponsor, Map2See Sports. This is a really cool platform, guys. You got to check this out.
Add some juice to your fantasy football experience. Play Map2See Football Mania, the new game that combines fantasy football with board game strategy. You see, you draft teams from a map of the United States, and your first pick, well, that's your fortress team, and you try to build an empire of adjacent territories. So, for example, if you pick the Green Bay Packers as your first pick, that's your fortress team, and you can build an empire around them by adding adjacent teams and territories like the Vikings, the Lions, the Bears, so on and so forth, unless someone else in your league beats you to those territories. So you win head-to-head matchups against other teams to grow your empire, but there's a pretty cool wrinkle involved because every player gets shields that they can deploy that add points to their team's game score that possibly flip a loss into a win for them. Map2See Football Mania is a lot like fantasy football in the old board game Risk had a baby. It's perfect for small groups of 2 to 8 people and can be played for the entire college and professional seasons. Visit map2see.com to form a league with your friends and hold your draft today. It's not too late.
You can find that link in the comments, guys. It's pretty cool. Pretty interesting of how that works. So
it's fun. And if you've ever played the board game Risk, it's basically Risk, but like a football version. And it's free to play. Like it costs you nothing to sign up. It's pretty cool. Very, very awesome thing that they're doing over there. All right, let's go. The question was Chris Olave versus Jacoby Myers. And this is funny, right? Because I'm still getting out of fantasy football draft mode and into fantasy football start-sit mode. These are two guys that I was hammering in my fantasy football drafts all year. So this is a fun one for me right off the top. Now, let's go ahead and start out with Chris Olave. Bottom line, I'm treating him as a high-volume wide receiver 2 with a steady floor, but a capped ceiling, right? Anytime Spencer Rattler is your starting quarterback, that's going to limit your touchdown upside. I'm expecting him to go for 12 to 16 PPR points on 9 to 12 targets. Upside is 18 plus if he can find his way into the end zone. Now the game environment, this one turned pretty nasty over the last few days. It's gotten better for the Saints, worse for the 49ers, right? Brock Purdy is out. He'll be missing this game. It's going to be Mac Jones running the show over there. This game has devolved into a low-scoring game that ultimately, if I'm forced with a decision that involves this game, I'm more on the avoid side than on the target side. Now, of course, there's always exceptions, right? You're starting Christian McCaffrey, for example. But this game has just a 40.5 point over-under, the second lowest of all 16 games on the Week 2 slate. Both teams are sporting bottom 14 implied totals. And usually when you have a bottom barrel over-under and both teams not even cracking average for their projected point total, that sets up as a game devoid of touchdowns, devoid of fantasy football fireworks, and ultimately a game you just don't want too much investment to in fantasy football. Now, Chris Olave's 2025 campaign got off to a pretty encouraging start in Week 1. It was exactly what I wanted to see when I was drafting him in the 6th rounds of my fantasy drafts all year. He played 85% of the offensive snaps. He caught 7 passes for 54 scoreless yards. That's just 12.4 PPR points. That doesn't scream fireworks, But this is the most important part, at least from a moving forward standpoint. He was a target vacuum. He got 13 of New Orleans' 41 available targets. That's a 32% target share. So he's going to offer a decent floor as long as he's getting that kind of target exposure. And he is going to offer a solid occasional ceiling if he can maintain a target share like that and start finding the end zone from time to time. And not to mention catching more passes, right? He only caught 7 out of 13. If he caught 10 or 11 out of 13, now we're really getting up there in PPR. So really encouraging usage from Chris Olave in week 1. It's ultimately on par with what we've come to expect for a guy who entered the season averaging 13.6 PPR points and 8.1 targets per game in 37 career games where he played at least 25 snaps. Now, the matchup against the 49ers, they're off to a pretty decent start against wide receivers this year. They held Seahawks wide receivers to 11 catches, which was mediocre, 139 yards, mediocre, 0 touchdowns, and 24.9 PPR points, which was the 11th fewest, ultimately pretty mediocre, but it is on par with what we saw from last year's 49ers, who held wide receivers to the 4th fewest catches, fewest yards, and 6th fewest PPR points per game, despite allowing the 14th most touchdowns. So there's nothing super terrifying about the 49ers defense, but there's nothing that's exciting about it either. They're more difficult for wide receivers than they are a black hole that you can target relentlessly with your wide receivers. Now, as for Jakobi Meyers, we're feeling a little bit more optimistic about Jakobi Meyers here in week 2 than Chris Olave, at least according to their placement in the heat map. Now, I'm treating Jakobi Meyers like a high-end wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. He's getting alpha volume in a potentially high-scoring, pass-heavy game, potentially without Brock Bowers. If Brock Bowers does not play, it sounds like he will, at least according to Pete Carroll, which is notorious for not necessarily being the most honest with his injury analysis or his injury predictions. But if Brock Bowers does not play, then the sky is the absolute limit for Jakobi Meyers. Like he's a legitimate dark horse to finish as fantasy's wide receiver 1 this week if Brock Bowers doesn't play. So I have him pegged for 13 to 18 PPR points on 8 to 11 targets. The game environment is pretty solid. It's one that ultimately you want some exposure to in fantasy football. You got a Chargers-Raiders game that has a 46.5 point over-under. It's tied for the 3rd highest among all 16 games. Both teams are sporting implied point totals over 21 points, which is pretty strong. It's a divisional bout between the Chargers and Raiders. Projects to be one of the higher scoring games on the week 2 slate. No shortage of touchdowns, no shortage of fantasy football fireworks. This is one you want exposure to. Now, Meyers himself, he played an elite 94% of the offensive snaps last week. He caught a team-high 8 of a team-leading 10 targets for 97 scoreless yards in week 1. He got you 17-plus PPR points, even without a touchdown. And honestly, that is a terrific start, and it's on par with a guy who entered the 2025 season averaging 15 PPR points and 9-plus targets per game in 12 games as the Raiders wide receiver 1 without Davante Adams last year. He's a high-end wide receiver 2 with genuine wide receiver 1 upside moving forward. He was one of the steals in the 7th round of fantasy drafts this year. Pretty good career against the Chargers, by the way. One game again, so we got to take that with a grain of salt. But in his only career game against the Chargers where Davante Adams was out of the picture, he wasn't on the Raiders, which was week 18 of last year, Meyers went insane. He caught 9 of 10 targets for 123 yards and 1 touchdown, 27-plus PPR points. The Chargers got off to a mediocre start against Hollywood Brown and the Chiefs last week. Now, they didn't have to go against Xavier Worthy. They didn't have to go against Rashee Rice. They did keep Chiefs wide receivers out of the end zone, but they allowed the 3rd most catches, 17, by the way, 17 catches, 5th most yards, and 10th most PPR points. And that is consistent with what we saw from last year's Chargers, a mediocre matchup for wide receivers, holding them to the 11th fewest catches, but allowing the 10th most yards, 6th most touchdown, 14th most PPR points per game. Ultimately, when it comes to Chris Olave versus Jakobi Meyers, we're talking similar floors, but there is going to be a higher ceiling there for Jakobi Meyers, especially if there's no Brock Bowers in this game. Chargers Raiders does have that shootout potential that Saints 49ers does not have. So if you're trying to make a decision, that is a good way to break that tie I'm going with the upside of Jacoby Myers over Chris Olave here in week 2.
And what better way to, just finalize a football weekend with the last game on a Monday night, on a doubleheader Monday night. So with rooting for Myers on your fantasy team. So,
yep, absolutely. Yeah. It's always fun to have a little bit of juice on that last game.
It always is here. Now, Jeff Rogers here on YouTube, he had actually a comment right before we started here, but he put another one in shortly after. And I want to actually get to that one because I want to be able to utilize or at least show some of these guys, the streamers tab. Jeff Rogers out here says Rams defense versus Tennessee or Arizona's defense versus Carolina. Something that we don't normally have a question. I think it's interesting here. So
yeah, I like it. It's a good problem to have. And you're right. Let me pop up the old week winner here. This one will go pretty quick. And honestly, guys, I will try my best to start speeding these up a little bit because I see we have a lot of comments to try and get to. It's hard though, because this really is my process, by the way. When I'm asked start sit questions, when I'm faced with my own start sit questions, this is my process. This is how the week winner came to be. I started creating this because I was faced with all these difficult start sit questions. I never found rankings or projections to be helpful. I didn't feel like they captured the entire story of the way a game could and most likely will play out. So that's why I started creating the week winner. So if I don't get to your question today, I'm really sorry. I'm trying to get through as many of these as I can. But like I said, anybody who wants access to this can get access anytime. WAP.com/BBFF. The first 3 people who use promo code YouTube in all caps, they're going to get an extra $5 off every single month for as long as they're subscribed. Now, this one, we're talking Rams defense. And what was the other one? The Cardinals defense. So on the week winner, you'll see this tab is nowhere near as pretty as the other tabs, but it is effective. I have a streamers and stashes tab, and I'll just go from right to left to show you. From on the right side, we have wide receivers to watch. These are guys that I'm not putting in my lineup, but these are guys that maybe I'm stashing on my bench, or at least I'm keeping an eye on in the waiver pool. Running backs to stash. This is a big part of my weekly process. Before kickoff every single week, I am adding high upside running backs to the end of my bench in case something happens to the guy in front of them, or in case they take over, or in case something happens where those weeks where something happens and suddenly one of these running backs becomes the top waiver wire priority ad. I want to get that guy on my bench before waivers so I don't have to win that race to the waiver wire. Okay. Quarterback streamers, if you're in a pinch and you need a guy to put into your lineup. Tight ends, if you're in a pinch and you need a guy to throw into your lineup, it's all there. Kickers. Over the last 2 years, I've been doing a really fun research project on kickers, trying to identify kickers that are going to get you double-digit points in their upcoming game. And we have some trends, some like really effective trends. It's become a really fun topic to discuss in the Basement Brood Fantasy Football Discord server. But if you're looking for a kicker, I got some trends for you to look at there. But the question was about defense, right? We're looking at Rams versus Cardinals. You'll see that both defenses are high on this list. Rams, Titans, Cardinals, Panthers. Both of them are top 5. Good problem to have. I'm going with the Rams here. Okay. The Titans offense is off to a very, very slow start with a rookie quarterback in Cam Ward. They really don't have a lot of options. Tyjae Spears is on IR. Calvin Ridley is the bona fide wide receiver 1, but after that, it's like rookie Alec Iomanor, really geriatric free agent Tyler Lockett, Chiga Okonkwo, who's just never, he's always flashed, but he's never become a consistent weapon in fantasy football. There's a lot to like about the Rams going in and shutting down the Titans, whereas the Cardinals-Panthers, the Panthers offense is also off to a really slow start, but again, Bryce Young ended last year on a tear, averaging 20-plus fantasy points per game over the last 6, 7, 8 games. I forget off the top of my head. There's always possibility that Cardinals-Panthers turns into a sneaky shootout if Bryce Young gets his act together. So ultimately, the likelihood of Cardinals-Panthers shooting out is significantly higher in my mind than Rams-Titans. I have the Rams probably in 80% of my leagues this year. I'm going Rams over Cardinals, but it's a good problem to have. If you're stuck with the Cardinals, that's not a bad thing. That's fine.
It's not a bad thing at all. Not a bad thing at all here.
Yep.
All right. Sticking on YouTube here. Clock, appreciate it. Jeff as well, appreciate the multiple comments there. Clock has a dilemma here. Egbuka or Ridley?
Egbuka or Ridley? All right, that's a good one. Let's dive into it. I'll start pulling up Ridley. In the meantime, why don't we toss a shout out to our sponsors over at BS Collectibles? Good guys over there.
Yep, hang on.
Yeah, you're good. I got to find Ridley real quick. There he is.
Are you into sports memorabilia? Then BS Collectibles is your one-stop shop for all things autographed. Whether you're looking to buy retail, stock up wholesale, or dive into the thrill of memorabilia breaks, BS Collectibles has what you need. Check out their retail website, join the live streams, or take a shot with the Fire Factory Mystery Box series and take your collection to the next level. BS Collectibles, whatever it is, we bring the fire.
Guys, if you collect sports memorabilia, jerseys, helmets, I highly recommend checking out their website, giving them a follow on. They do really cool live breaks on TikTok. Very good guy. In fact, truth is, BS Collectibles isn't a official sponsor of Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. We do some cool partnership stuff together, but ultimately, I just want to promote their business because they're really good human beings that do really cool things for anybody who collects sports memorabilia. So, what were we doing? Oh, yeah, Calvin Ridley versus somebody. I don't remember who.
Egbuka.
Emeka Egbuka, yeah. So let's start with Calvin Ridley. And that's a good place to start, right? Because we were just talking about the Titans. Now, ultimately, I was talking a little bit about the game environment for the Titans and how they're just kind of a scary offense to invest in this early into Cam Ward's career. And we saw it last week. The Titans just didn't compete. Now, it's not a very conducive environment for fantasy scoring for the Titans. They have a terrifyingly low 18 implied points. Vegas has them projected for about 18 points this week, which is the second lowest of all 32 teams, only behind the Cleveland Browns, who are going up against the Baltimore Ravens. They just project as an offense that won't offer many touchdowns, which is the easiest way to score fantasy points. And if they're not going to score a lot of touchdowns, they're not going to get you a lot of fantasy football fireworks. You're banking on catches and yards. They're just more of an offense to target with the Rams defense than one you want to squeeze into your lineups, with some exceptions. Now, this is one good thing for Calvin Ridley. The Titans are entering this game as 5.5-point underdogs, suggesting the Titans will be playing this game from behind. That is a potential negative game script that may create a spike in passing volume, aka target potential, for Calvin Ridley, who should be a target hog in that offense, at the expense of rushing volume. In other words, if the Rams are able to get off to a hot start, grab a lead, maintain that lead early, sooner rather than later, the Titans are going to they're going to be forced into a pass-heavy game script. And there's one guy on the Titans that's going to be the primary beneficiary of soaking up all those targets, and that's Calvin Ridley. So he could become a quote-unquote garbage time hero. He could become quote-unquote a cheap source of volume. If you're willing to accept that touchdown is unlikely, but catches could come through, Calvin, that's what you're banking on with Calvin Ridley, at least in week 2. Now, there's no way around it. His 2025 campaign had opened with a thud last week, right? He caught just 4 of 8 targets, 27 scoreless yards, 6.7 PPR points. Now, the good news is he did play an elite 95% of the Titans' offensive snaps. He garnered 32% of the Titans' target share. Like I was just talking about, he's going to get targets. He's going to be the number 1 option. That's a good thing. And that's a good sign for his floor as the Titans throw more passes. They'll let the leash off Cam Ward a little bit, theoretically, moving forward. Of course, until Cam Ward takes a serious step forward, his ceiling is going to be capped because the Titans' offense is just going to be bad. The matchup, Rams got off to a really nice start last week. They held Nico Collins and Texans wide receivers to just 10 catches, 121 yards, no touchdowns, and the 8th fewest PPR points. And that's a continuation of what we saw from last year's Rams. The very stout against wide receivers. They held them to the 2nd fewest catches, 4th fewest yards, 8th fewest PPR points per game, despite allowing the 10th most touchdowns, which is something we're not expecting from the Titans anyway. Doesn't project as a good matchup for Calvin Ridley in week 2. All we're hoping for with Calvin Ridley is that he finds a way to rack up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 catches in negative game script. Now, as for Egbuka, there's no denying that his career got off to a really nice start. I mean, this guy stole the show basically last week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In the game environment, I found this one to be really, really surprising. And I'll talk about this in a second. But trying to keep it 100% focused on stats, facts, data, avoiding my gut, avoiding what my brain and my heart and all those things are telling me. The fact is that this game has a low over-under. It has a low implied total, 42.5 points. That's the fourth lowest among all 16 games available on the Week 2 slate. Both teams are sporting bottom 16 implied point totals. Buccaneers at Texans, it just projects as a lower scoring game that is going to limit touchdown opportunity in fantasy football fireworks. There's a 2.5 point spread, so it's not expected to be a blowout in either direction. It's just both teams sporting rather mediocre implied totals. It's just a very blah game for fantasy football purposes, at least according to what the Vegas sportsbooks are projecting for Buccaneers Texans. And I wrote this in the week winner. I try not to do this, right? I don't ever want to get my gut involved, but to me, that over-under seems so slow or so low. Like, you got CJ Stroud, you got Baker Mayfield. Like, Baker Mayfield with the Bucs, they score points a lot. It just seems too low for CJ Stroud versus Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers being implied for just 20 points against the Texans. Something's fishy about this over-under. So again, the data says it's going to be low scoring, but I'll leave it up to you to decide if you think that's accurate or not. Now, Egbuka stole the show last week, right? Played 93% of the offensive snaps in his first game in the NFL. That's terrific. He stole the show. He caught 4 of 6 targets, 67 yards, 2 tutties, 23 plus PPR points. That kind of playing time, 93%. He's on the field. It's no fluke. It wasn't one of those deals where he got on the field 40% of the time and just crushed his opportunity. He's on the field. 20% target share. That makes him a high-end wide receiver 3 with an obviously explosive ceiling. I mean, this dude came out and got you 23 plus in his first ever game in the NFL. Now, the Texans, they got off to a slow start against Puka Nacua and Rams wide receivers last week, keeping them out of the end zone, but otherwise allowing the 5th most catches and 3rd most yards, and ultimately the 7th most PPR points. Last year's Texans were a bit up and down when it came to wide receivers. They held them to the 5th fewest catches, but plenty of efficiency. 5th fewest catches, but still the 16th most yards, 4th most touchdowns, and 16th quote unquote most PPR points per game. They were right in the middle of the pack. Very average, very mediocre, not scary, not exciting, just very mediocre. There's just ultimately, though, the story about that is there's nothing to fear for Mike Evans or Emeka Egbuka. There's nothing to be scared of here. If you're looking for, this is one of those scenarios where I recommend looking at your projected matchup, looking at your opponents, looking at anything that's happened on Thursday Night Football. If you had any investment in the Packers-Commanders game, or if your opponent had any investment in the Packers-Commanders game, do you need floor, just targets and catches to secure the win and just score quote-unquote guaranteed points? Or do you need to swing for the fences, try and hit a home run and aim for that upside? Because if you're going for upside, that's going to be Egbuka. Buccaneers offense is significantly better than Titans offense, more likely to score touchdowns. Egbuka is clearly a threat to score touchdowns. The likelihood of scoring 3 touchdowns in 2 games, that's a whole different story, but there's more upside to Egbuka, especially if you do believe this game could shoot out and exceed that over-under. Calvin Ridley is going to be the guy that should see 10 plus targets in this game, albeit with limited efficiency, limited touchdown upside. Ultimately, I would like Egbuka's floor and ceiling combo a bit better than Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to offer a similar floor to Calvin Ridley, but ultimately, I'm going to Egbuka on this one, and I feel like it's a 54 to 40 type of split.
I like that. I like the Egbuka as well. So
yeah.
We'll keep things rolling here on the comments section here. Josh Palanchar, 4-point PPR, Rome Odunze, or Cortland Sutton.
Oh, that's another one. See, I'm fully incapable. I keep telling myself, Tanner, that I'm going to go, all right, I'm going to rapid fire. I'm just going to go off the dome and I can't do it. I have to consult the week winner. It's like, I can't tell you an answer. By the way, Josh Palanchar, I don't know why, but that last name sounds like a Pokemon, and I think that's awesome. Like it sounds like a badass fire type Pokemon. I love that. All right, Josh, let me pull up. What do we got? Roma Dunze, Cortland Sutton, full point PPR. All right, let me pull up Cortland Sutton. Let's get into this thing. I'll tell you off the dome, Cortland Sutton feels like it's going to be my answer here, but ultimately, let's see where this thing goes. And that's largely because of PPR. Now, I'm treating Cortland Sutton like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. Losing my voice here. There's going to be a sturdy, volume-driven floor. That's the appeal with Cortland Sutton. This is a guy that gets his targets, right? I have him pegged. I am not. Never mind. Cortland Sutton, I have him pegged for 14 to 18 PPR. I still can't believe I didn't see anything in the comments about that. That's unbelievable. 14 to 18 PPR points, 7 to 10 targets, upside for 20 plus if he's able to find the end zone, push for double-digit targets. Now, this is another game that my gut tells me there's a little bit of sneaky shootout potential if Daniel Jones can play the way that he did in week 1, although that might be more Dolphins defense specific than it is Daniel Jones specific, but that's not what we're talking about here. Ultimately, the stats, the data says low scoring game, 42.5 over under. That's the 4th lowest among all 16 games on the week 2 slate. Both teams are sporting bottom 16 implied totals. That's not good. That's usually a bad thing for fantasy football purposes. Limited touchdown opportunity, limited fantasy football fireworks. It should be a good game. The spread is 1.5 points. It should be balanced, should be competitive. Both teams should have a very balanced offensive approach, but ultimately this is just it looks like a very blah type of fantasy football game. Now, Cortland Sutton, he did what we expected him to do. He played an elite 95% of the offensive snaps. He caught a very nice 6 of 9 targets for 61 yards, 1 touchdown, 18 plus PPR points. It was just another day at the office for Cortland Sutton, a guy who averaged 17 plus PPR points and dang near 9 targets per game over his last 11 games with Bo Nix last season. Now, the matchup against the Colts got off to a great start last week, just like all across the board, offensively, defensively. They limited Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Dolphins wide receivers to just they did give up the 14th quote unquote most catches, but they otherwise held them to the 9th fewest yards, no touchdown, 9th fewest PPR points. Anytime you can contain Tyreek and Jalen Waddle to the 9th fewest yards and no touchdowns, that's a pretty darn good start. Now, again, that might be more that the Dolphins offense is broken, but that's not what we're talking about here. Ultimately, last week's performance, and this kind of goes into what I was just saying about the Dolphins offense being broken. It was kind of a surprise to see the Colts defense perform that well, because last year's Colts presented a slightly favorable matchup for wide receivers. They did limit them to the 14th fewest catches, but otherwise allowed the 12th most yards, 14th most touchdowns, and ultimately the 11th most PPR points per game. So with Cortland Sutton, we're talking about a guy who has a safe floor, but he's playing in what's projected to be a low-scoring game. Now, if you believe this game could shoot out a bit, now that's going to raise the ceiling for Cortland Sutton. But even still, even in a low-scoring game, this is typically one of the guys who has a bit of touchdown upside because he's one of the guys that Bo Nix looks for when the Broncos do get into the red zone, okay? So I feel fine with Cortland Sutton. If Cortland Sutton's in my lineup, I'm not like, oh my God, this guy's going to go nuts this week. But I feel good about it. There's nothing about it that's like, I really don't want to put Cortland Sutton in there, but I don't have a choice. Okay. Now, the other one, thank you for putting that on the screen, Tanner, because I totally forgot who the next one was. So, Roma Dunze. I still don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but who cares? Here we go. I am treating Roma Dunze like a high-end wide receiver 3 that is very quickly approaching wide receiver 2, if not wide receiver 1 status. Plenty of upside. This is possibly a pass-heavy shootout against a bad defense. I have Roma Dunze pegged for 11 to 15 PPR points on 7 to 10 targets. The ceiling is 18 plus if he can find the end zone. Now, here's where it gets fun. This game, if you're a football fan, this game is fun because you got Ben Johnson returning to Detroit for a matchup with the Lions, and you know he wants to win this one. And who better to game plan against the Detroit Lions than the guy who saw the Lions defense every day in practice over the last 3 years. Now, that being said, Vegas doesn't necessarily see it that way. Vegas has Chicago projected for about 20.5 points, which is the 11th fewest among all 32 teams, suggesting touchdowns in fantasy football fireworks could be limited. And on top of that, and this is actually a good thing for Roma Dunze, but the Bears are 5.5-point underdogs on the road in Detroit. That suggests they'll be playing this game from behind. That's a negative game script that can push them into a more pass-heavy approach while suppressing their rushing volume. That's a bad thing for DeAndre Swift, a good thing for Roma Dunze. All in all, this is just a game that might favor Chicago's passing attack more than their rushing attack. Now, all of that being said, if you believe, like I've been talking about the last 3 games now, if you believe that the Bears can exceed scoring expectations, I certainly do. I think they can definitely get over 20 points against the Lions with Ben Johnson coming back to Detroit, scheming against the defense that he's gone against for 3 years now. This game does have plenty of shootout potential with a very nice 46-point over-under. And Roma Dunze, he started his season off great. Very high note. He led all Bears wide receivers in snaps. He played 94% of the Bears snaps. He turned that opportunity into a pretty strong stat line. He caught 6 of 9. Very nice. Targets for 37 yards and a touchdown, 15 plus PPR points. Those 9 targets, by the way, led the entire team. It wasn't DJ Moore. It wasn't any of the other guys. It was Roma Dunze who led the team in targets, which is a fantastic sign that he could be a focal point in Ben Johnson's offense moving forward. Now, we know Ben Johnson. We know what he does. He's going to be able to spread the ball around. DJ Moore is going to have big days in this offense, and he's probably still the wide receiver 1. But all in all, it's a great sign moving forward for Roma Dunze and his fantasy football stock. Now, take this part with a grain of salt. His career against the Lions, he averaged just 8.1 PPR points and 6.5 targets per game in 2 tries against the Lions last year, but he was also the third best. He basically ran as the Bears' third wide receiver behind DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's out of the picture. Roma Dunze is a full-time player. I candidly, I kind of regret even putting that in the week winner. I feel like that might do more harm than I'm going to rip that out right now. People don't need to know that because that does more harm than good. It's data that doesn't matter anymore. Now, his matchup this week against the Detroit Lions. They're a mixed bag in week 1 against the Packers. They did hold Packers wide receivers to just 10 catches, which was the 10th fewest. But they also surrendered 160 yards and a touchdown, which resulted in 32 PPR points, which was the 13th most among all wide receivers last week. And if we look back at 2024, Detroit was notoriously vulnerable to wide receivers. They did limit them to the 5th fewest touchdowns, but even if touchdowns are where we get our fantasy points from, and even despite holding them to the 5th fewest touchdowns, they allowed the 2nd most PPR points per game. And that's because they allowed the 2nd most catches and most receiving yards in all of football. And Ben Johnson knows that. Ben Johnson is very aware of what that defense's vulnerabilities are. In short, Roma Dunze has a favorable matchup that could offer more opportunities for another solid fantasy football day. So the question is, Courtland Sutton or Roma Dunze? And this is another one of those, do you need floor or do you need ceiling type of decisions? Courtland Sutton's going to be a safer option. There's no doubt about it, right? Until we see Roma Dunze string together multiple games of 7, 8, 9, 10 targets, Courtland Sutton's going to be a safer bet. But the upside swings in Roma Dunze's favor this week, at least, because if that Broncos-Colts game is going to be a low-scoring affair and the Bears-Lions game is going to be a pass-heavy possible shootout for the Bears, Roma Dunze could have a very similar floor to Courtland Sutton. They both might see 10-ish targets, but Roma Dunze in a pass-heavy game script against Ben Johnson's former team, a team that he knows very well. This one is tough, Tanner. This one's tough. It's not. There's no clear winner. I'd say, Josh, if you're like, I just need the safe. Give me the safest play. That's Courtland Sutton. But man, if you want to swing for the fences, I'm not going to fault you for going Roma Dunze. Me personally, if I'm making this decision, I'm just a sliver leaning in Courtland Sutton's direction. And that's partially because I think Broncos Colts has a possibility to turn into a little bit of a shootout, but Courtland Sutton is a better bet to get those targets. But man, I'm not going to fault anybody or fight anybody who goes Roma Dunze over Sutton here.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of on the Rome side of things just because I like swinging for the fences. But
is that how you say it, by the way? Is it Rome?
I'm pretty sure. Okay.
You know,
I've heard
All
it
right.
more than that way. I could be wrong. I could be listening to it wrong as well. So for all I know. but yeah, no, that was a good one here. Let's get a quick Twitch comment in here. Broly
Nice.
619. Nice. ETN or Hampton at flex non-PPR.
Non-PPR. What is that?
Non-PPR.
Never heard of it. No, I'm just kidding. By the way, according to Google's AI overview, Roma Dunze is pronounced Rome Odense.
Okay.
So there's that. I have no idea if that's accurate,
yeah.
but Rome Odense. It's funny how I can spend 70 hours in spreadsheets and still have some of these guys. Like, I don't know last year
There's
I
some
got
tough names,
torched
man.
in the comments. Last year I got torched in the comments because I was calling him Amon Ra St. Brown, and it's Amon Ra. Like, holy dude, people get real mad if you don't pronounce names right. It's wild.
Hey, that's their player, man. That's their player.
Maybe it was his burner account. I don't know. Anyway. Yo, Broly, thanks for commenting here, man. Really appreciate it. Or woman. I have no idea. It's a screen name, right? And there's, man, one thing that's really cool, by the way, is the explosion of women who play fantasy football. Like, there's so many now that play. I love it. It's so cool. Except when my wife beats me, that drives me crazy, but that's a different thing. But anyways, Travis Etienne or Omarion Hampton in the flex spot, man. Yep. Gotta go to the week winner. I'm trying to answer some of these off the top of the dome, but it's not.
It's tough though. I mean, so these are good questions here.
They are very good questions. All right, let's start with Omarion Hampton. He was the first one I found here. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I think there's a lot of people that need to not overreact. Okay, week 1 was not pretty for Omarion Hampton. The usage was pretty. His role is pretty. He went up against a really tough defense historically. We'll talk about that here in a second. Ultimately, I'm treating Hampton as a volume-based RB2 in a better matchup than last week. I am expecting 11 to 16 PPR points, 13 to 17 touches. The upside is 16 plus if he finds the end zone. Now, I do want to note the floor looks good so far, but don't necessarily count on it yet because Najee Harris only played a couple snaps. Was he just eased into the offense after he basically missed all of training camp with an eye injury? Or is that a sign of things to come, right? We don't know yet. We have to see what the data tells us in the coming weeks. But ultimately, good start for him from a usage standpoint. Now, this is a game we want exposure to. Chargers, Raiders. We talked a little bit about it earlier with Jacoby Myers. So this is a good opportunity for me to not spend too much time on this part, but high scoring game. Chargers have a nice implied total. We're expecting touchdowns out of the Chargers. That's a good thing for Omarion Hampton. And we do like that they are favored. That is that's not a bad thing for Omarion Hampton. If they play this game with the lead, if they enjoy and experience positive game script, Hampton gets touches, period. Okay. All of that is good stuff. Now, he played a dominant 80% of the offensive snaps in week 1, a dominant 17 of the backfield's 19 touches, including 2 targets and catches. But yeah, just 61 scoreless yards, 8.1 PPR points. It was disappointing. It was a bummer, right? I'm one of those guys who was really high on Omarion Hampton as a dynasty rookie pick, not necessarily at his draft cost this year. But Najee Harris handled just 2 touches, 18% of the snaps. It gives Hampton a look of a locked-in running RB1, but it's also possible the Chargers were easing him in. We already talked about that. But he does look like a volume-based, higher-end RB2 moving forward. Now, the matchup is mediocre, but it's better than last week, okay? For what it's worth, the Chiefs last year were really dangerous against running backs, okay? So it's really important to remember that Hampton got off to a slow start, but he also was not handed a cupcake matchup in week 1. Now, the Raiders, they got off to a mediocre start against another rookie, Travion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, Patriots running backs. They allowed the 4th most catches, 8th most receiving yards, otherwise held them to the 6th fewest rushing yards, no touchdowns, and the 11th, quote-unquote, fewest PPR points. Very mediocre, very average. Nothing scary, nothing exciting. The middle of the pack standing, very consistent with last year's Raiders. Now, last year's Raiders allowed the 15th most rushing yards. That's middle of the pack, but that's not a bad thing for Omarion Hampton.
sixth most receiving touchdowns. Not likely to be something that Hampton will take advantage of. But they did limit running backs to the 14th fewest touchdowns, 16th fewest catches, 11th fewest receiving yards, and ultimately the 16th fewest PPR points. But the key here, all of these numbers are very mediocre, right? 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. That's all right in the middle of the pack of a 32 team NFL. Still, though, higher scoring game. Chargers are favored. Better matchup than the Chiefs. This is a good-looking spot for Omarion Hampton to have a better week in week 2 than he had in week 1. Okay, stay the course. I'm starting him with confidence. Let's call it hesitant. I'm hesitantly optimistic about Omarion Hampton in week 2. Shoot, who is? Oh, ETN. Man, I'll tell you what. I'm feeling much more bullish. Hold on, let me try and slide this over. I'm feeling much more bullish on ETN now than I was. Wow, this is crazy. A couple weeks ago, especially now that they traded Tank Bigsby. But week 1 was a very encouraging sign for Travis Etienne. I'm treating him like a high-end RB2 with RB1 upside in a possible shootout and a clear lead role post Tank Bigsby trade. I'm expecting 14 to 18 PPR points based on 16 to 20 touches with some solid receiving work. There's a ceiling of 20 plus if he scores a touchdown and or racks up catches. That applies to PPR leagues, though, so that doesn't really help you here. We talked about this game. No need to dig into it. Great game. This is a game you want to target in fantasy football. There's a little bit of hesitation about starting a running back who is the underdog, like he's on the Jaguars who are expected to lose. So if the Jaguars do fall behind here, for most running backs, that's not a good thing. But ETN is plenty capable of staying involved as a wide receiver or as a receiving back. Okay, so he can still get you scrimmage yards. Now, highly encouraging start to the season for Travis Etienne. He played a strong 61% of the offensive snaps, handled 19 of the Jaguars' 29 touches, 3 targets and catches. He got you 150 scoreless yards. Dude was efficient on his touches, 18 plus PPR points. And then shortly after that, the Jaguars traded top threat to Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, to the Eagles. Now, you do have to keep an eye on Bashal Tutin. That's a rookie that I was trying to get plenty of exposure to during fantasy football draft season. He's a good bet to get significantly more involved as the season goes on, especially with Tank Bigsby out of the picture. Tutin is almost by default the next RB2, although LaQuint Allen actually played ahead of him last week based on snap count, but still keep an eye on Bashal Tutin. But for now, heading into week 2, Travis Etienne is the RB1 and it's not close. He's the obvious RB1. Matchup against the Bengals. Now, they allowed plenty of fantasy football production to Browns running backs, specifically Dylan Sampson, in week 1. Now, they did hold them to just 40 rushing yards, but again, the Browns were trying to have a rushing attack with Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford. But they did allow rushing touchdowns. They allowed 9 catches. Dylan Sampson went crazy in PPR. 61 receiving yards, 25 plus PPR points. Last year's Bengals weren't a shutdown group either. They held running backs to the 14th fewest rushing yards, 13th fewest receiving yards, 9th fewest receiving touchdowns, but they also allowed the 6th most rushing touchdowns, 14th most catches, and 14th most PPR points per game. This is another one that's pretty tough, Tanner. Travis Etienne versus Omarion Hampton. Ultimately, pop over the team projections tab. The Jaguars are projected to score 23 points. The Chargers have them slightly beat at 25 points. If this was PPR league, I am for sure going Travis Etienne. Like not even like it's 70 to 30. I'd be going Travis Etienne, but it's not
non-PPR.
It's non-PPR. So ultimately what you're hoping for here is scrimmage yards and touchdowns. That's the only way that you're scoring points in this scenario.
And if you just my little input here, like from a non-PPR standpoint, I'm leaning towards Hampton in this one.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This is pretty 50-50. I
I'm going to go like 50.1% to 49.9% in Travis Etienne's direction. I think there's a chance he racks up a really good amount of scrimmage yards. You're not going to get points for the catches, but you do get points for the receiving yards. And I think that's going to be a big part of the Jaguars game. If this game does shoot out the way that it looks like it should, there is a risk to Omarion Hampton, his playing time in week 1 coming down a little bit. I mean, the Chargers signed Najee Harris for a reason. So if they were just easing him in, if Najee Harris is going to be the goal line back, that's going to severely limit Hampton's touchdown upside. I'm going a sliver in Etienne's direction, but I mean, if you ask me 1 hour from now, I might flip that. It's that close.
It is pretty close there. I am going to answer a quick question here. And Scott, I am so sorry that you are in this position here. It is a rough situation if these are your two choices. But make it easy on yourself. Look at what the weapons Rattler has versus Mac Jones and what Rattler can do versus Mac Jones. And just if you're in the situation, just go Rattler. Make it easy on yourself. Quite frankly, I've already bet the New Orleans money line. I think they have an opportunity to win today. So I'd say I'd go the Rattler route.
I would actually go the other route. And that's
really
the only reason I say that is because the 49ers are projected to score more points than the Saints are.
Oh, so, that's right. Data. Yeah.
The data suggests the 49ers are going to score more. And look, man, Mac Jones, you can say what you will about him, but he's capable. And now he has Kyle Shanahan, who's one of the best offensive minds in football. True. Like that dude is constantly maximizing the output he gets out of his quarterbacks, his running backs, his receivers, his tight ends. So if you're right, this is not like nobody wants to be in this position, but if I have to pick one, I'll take Mac Jones.
Mac Jones. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think the answer is pouring yourself a very stiff glass of whiskey and just drowning your sorrows. But if you have to pick one, it's Mac Jones, in my opinion.
That's correct. That's correct. Let's pop in over here to the Discord section.
Discord.
I do have a good question on Discord.
All I was gonna say is I'd say I'm gonna try my best to start doing some rapid fire because I feel bad. I know for a fact I'm not going to be able to get to all of these, and that always makes me feel bad. But so I'll try my best to do some rapid fire before we wrap it up. I still got to set all my lineups, so we'll wrap it up shortly. But like Tanner and I have been saying, guys, this heat map, or it's not the heat map anymore. It's called the week winner now. But this can be yours. This can be anybody's. I put this out for my subscribers every single week, week 2, week 3, week 4. I do week winners all the way up through the Super Bowl. Okay. So if you want access to all this research, I spend 30 plus hours doing this research every single week. And if you want access to it, wap.com/BBFF, first 3 people, and maybe they already have, I don't know if it's still there, but the first 3 people that enter promo code YouTube, all caps, you get an extra $5 off per month, every single month, for as long as you're subscribed. So hopefully that helps if I can't get to your question.
Correct. Great. All right, let's get this one in here. So last week on our week 1 live show, you talked a lot about David Njoku. Okay. And how much you love Njoku. Okay. Now there was a question that came into play that we were kind of saying, hey, let's wait and see. Stash guy, we'll wait and see here. He's a little higher on your streaming list this week for tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Njoku versus Fannin. Let's get into week 2 here and let's see where the mindset is here, because this is all of a sudden after 1 week, who would have thought this would become a conversation?
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you everybody for Man,
hey, this is your Discord, man.
my friend Matt Coakley, shout out Matt, great guy. He texted me. Earlier this week I was invited to do a local radio show, which was really cool. 105.7 The Fan here in Milwaukee. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. And my buddy Matt texts me and he goes, hey man, really nice job on the radio. You're a natural, blah, blah, blah. But I'm still mad at you because you were so high on David Njoku and I started him. And what I told him is that the process was right. A Browns tight end had a really good game. Not the Browns tight end, but a Browns tight end. And you're right, Tanner. There was, I forget the gentleman's name, but somebody asked in the show last week if Harold Fannin is fantasy relevant coming into the season. And I said I would not feel comfortable putting him into my week 1 lineup. There's just too many uncertainties there, but he's very much a threat. He's very much, I remember talking last week about his versatile usage. In week 1, he was like schemed. Like they used him everywhere. He played in the slot. He played in line. He played in the backfield. He had at least 1 carry. I think maybe 2. I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, it was very clear they want to get this dude the ball. So it's like he's a tight end, but he's also kind of like their third wide receiver. Now, I do want to be clear. I think Njoku, he's not just done. Like, he's not just going to go away. Njoku's going to have some days. And I think this week Njoku could have a big day. I don't want to answer this question, man. I don't want to. I would like to just
I just thought it was interesting. It showed up on the Discord here, and I was like, we had this conversation last week a little bit, and look what happened after 1 week. All of a sudden, Fannin became a guy. It felt like.
Yeah, he did, man. And that's the thing is, it's almost like he's not playing a different position, but it's almost like he's playing a different position because they're using him like a third wide receiver. But David Njoku still played 80. I'm looking at the week winner right now. He still played 84% of the offensive snaps. Just three of 6 targets. Harold Fannin played less. He only played 72% of the snaps, but he's 9 targets, man. That's no joke. Look, two things are true. It's really important that we don't overreact to week 1.
Correct.
But it's also really important that we take week 1 seriously. Like, this type of usage is not a fluke. Like, Harold Fannin is here and he's here to stay. Do I think Harold Fannin is going to outperform David Njoku every single week? No. Njoku, I talked about this last week, and I can't remember if I put this in this week's week winner. I reminded everybody it's too soon to quit on Njoku's massive upside with Joe Flacco specifically. In 2023, these two guys played 6 games together, and Njoku averaged 18 plus PPR points, 9 plus targets per game. Njoku and Flacco is a really strong battery. It's a really strong tandem. And even last week I shared in the Discord server. Let me pull that over here real quick on the screen. So here's the BBFF Discord server, guys. I realize you can't really see that too well, but lots and lots of helpful channels that we can talk about in here. And I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to be able to pull it up. But basically, I shared a video with everybody in the Discord server, and it's basically just Joe Flacco and David Njoku looking like little kids on a playground, just best buddies. They're like kicking their feet. They're joking around with one another. It's like, whatever. I don't read too much into that stuff for fantasy football, but my whole point is that there's a very real chemistry between the two. That's the point that I'm trying to get at. If it's me, if I close my eyes and think, okay, I personally am trying to make this decision for my own fantasy football lineup. Am I going Njoku or Fannin? I'm gonna roll the dice on Njoku. Here's what I will say, though. This is a good problem to have because the Browns are 12.5-point underdogs against the ball. Let me pop open the week winner real quick here, Tanner. Okay. The Browns are 12.5-point underdogs. So they, like, you talk about negative spreads, you talk about negative game script, you talk about pass-heavy game script. Joe Flacco's throwing this thing 45 times at minimum. There are going to be targets galore for Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Harold Fannin, David Njoku, Dylan Sampson. Like, all of these guys are going to get opportunities. So, like, you can't go wrong with this. And as for the matchup, by the way, Baltimore got rocked by Buffalo tight ends in week 1. 7 catches, 97 yards, 1 touchdown, 22 plus PPR points, 2 Buffalo Bills tight ends. Now, last year, the Ravens were much closer to average against tight ends, 15th most PPR points per game, but there's nothing scary about that matchup. And if they're trending down after what we saw from them against the Bills, like, this is a good problem to have. Joe Flacco is going to throw the ball a ton. Harold Fannin could crack 10 plus targets, and Njoku could crack 10 plus targets. If it's me, I'm going back to David Njoku one more week as a potential bounce back, as a potential squeaky wheel, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, this is definitely a coin flip type of scenario. There's just no way of being confident in either answer, So I'm going to go David Njoku if that's what I was doing with my own lineup, but I'm not going to fight somebody if they're like, no, it's Harold Fannin. I would just say, okay, cool, go Harold Fannin, No,
it's a fair toss up there. So that was an entertaining question. All right. Should we get into we call it like a final 5 minutes where it's rapid fire?
Let's try. I'll try and do it without diving into the week winner. But if anybody wants access, wap.com/BBFF, promo code YouTube, you get $5 off every month for as long as you're a member of the BBFF family. But
links below.
Let's do our best.
Here we go.
I'll tell you right now, I am not good at
rapid fire. Let's see what we got. First one here, Will Hayes. Will Hayes, appreciate you. DeAndre Swift or David Montgomery, PPR?
Shoot. I don't love it. Well, you think about game flow, game script. David Montgomery has the edge there. This is a risky spot for DeAndre Swift because they are 6-point underdogs. You're going to need him to rack up targets to stay relevant if this game plays out the way that Vegas expects it to. Lions are a really, really tough matchup for running backs. I'm going to go David Montgomery on this one. I'm going to go David Montgomery here. And I mean, the Lions have an implied point total of 26 plus points. If this game gets into a high scoring game, Montgomery's always a pretty good bet for a goal line touchdown. So I'm going to go Montgomery here. He's more likely to find the end zone than DeAndre Swift is.
All right. Mike 32, half PPR, start 2, Quentin Johnson, K9, Tracy Judkins. Terrible options, I know.
You can't go Judkins yet, especially in this game.
No.
12.5-point underdogs. They're like I said before, Flacco's going to have to throw the ball 45 plus times. That's a great thing for Dylan Sampson. Judkins is probably going to be on a snap count. He's not an option in here. So that brings us down to 3. Quentin Johnson, who's got a possible shootout with the Raiders. Now, Quentin Johnson has not been a model of consistency in his career. Like last week, he got you 25 plus points. To me, that screams regression. This could be one of those Quentin Johnson, nope, not happening. It could be Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. And then you got K9. K9, the arrow is pointing down there. I am praying that he gets traded to the Commanders from a fantasy football standpoint.
Ooh.
But that's not, Zach Charbonnet, it was a very, very even split last week, and that's not good for Kenneth Walker. The Seahawks are 3-point underdogs against the Steelers. Really ugly, low-scoring game. There's not a lot to love about Kenneth Walker. There's not a lot. We talked about Tyrone Tracy. Yeah, I hate to say it, Mike 32, but I don't. There's not a single one of these guys that I'm like, we got to get him in the lineup, unfortunately. Judkins, to me, is not an option. So it's down to those other 3. And then it's just coin flips. I think if you're going, listen, I'll tell you this. If you're going for upside, if you need to swing for the fences, it's going to be Quentin Johnson. That game could shoot out. He could continue his hot streak. Understand that the floor is significantly lower than Kenneth Walker and Tyrone Tracy. It's possible this dude gets you 0. Okay. You got to be willing to accept that is a possibility. But the upside for 15 plus, 20 plus, that's there. Oh, half PPR. So that places a little bit more of an emphasis on touchdowns. But still, the Chargers have a better implied total than both the Giants and the Seahawks. If it's me, I'm going Quentin Johnston and I'm going Kenneth Walker. Those 2 out of those options. I don't feel good about any of them, but that's if that's all I'm given, those are the 2 I'm going with.
It's a terrible option. So, sitting back here, full PPR, Ekbuka or Garrett Wilson. Baker is his QB, if that matters.
It matters in DFS tournaments. I'd say it matters less in redraft or in a typical fantasy football league. If you think the game's going to shoot out, then I can understand stacking Baker with Egbuka. But ultimately, I wouldn't let that influence my decision. I think it's really tough to ignore the opportunity and the target volume that Garrett Wilson had last week against who did the Jets shoot out with? Oh, the Steelers. That was terrific.
Steelers, yeah.
Yeah, that was a game that was supposed to be nauseating, and it turned out to be like probably one of the
Really
best
good.
games on the slate. Jets, who do the Jets play? Oh, they're playing against the Bills. 6.5 point underdogs. Bills got torched by Ravens wide receiver. I'm going Garrett Wilson here. But like the Jets are going to have to throw the ball a ton. Garrett Wilson is going to get plenty of targets. Egbuka was great, but he did most of his damage off of touchdowns. Not that that's a bad thing, but is that sustainable? Like, is he going to get you 2 touchdowns every week? Probably not. Garrett Wilson is going to be a safer bet for consistent volume, especially if the Jets are going to be throwing the ball a ton. Bills got beat up by Ravens wide receivers last week. Garrett Wilson should have a nice enough day in fantasy football.
I'm trying to stick with the 2 or 3 options here. Booty or Egbuka. Hayden has here.
Booties. I forget who tweeted it. Somebody tweeted on Wednesday morning after waivers ran, who got some booty last night. I was like, that was really clever. Well done. I wish I would have captured that to give them a proper shout out. But let's see. I think you got to go Egbuka here, but let me refresh my memory on who are the Patriots. Oh, the Dolphins. Oh, jeez. The Dolphins were so bad last week.
So bad.
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting a low-scoring game here. Patriots implied total of 21 points. I mean, if the Dolphins were as bad this week as they were last week, the Patriots might be able to just control that game on the ground. They might not have to throw the ball too much. Buccaneers, Falcons, that's going to be a low-scoring game. Buccaneers have a lower. I'm going to go Egbuka here. The ceiling, I like Booty, and I tried to add him to a lot of my teams, but the ceiling that's Egbuka. I think both guys are going to give you a very similar floor, but Egbuka is going to offer that explosion possibility.
All right. Fannin or Juwan?
I don't want to do this one, man. I don't want to. I'm going to go Fannin here. Look, Juwan Johnson was one of my top waiver wire. So every week I put out a quote unquote, I call it the waiver wire winner. It's a list of players to add to your roster, but it also offers suggestions of should you use your priority on this player? Should you waste that spot in line to go to the back of the line? Or should you just wait until waivers run and then just pick them up on Wednesday morning? And people need to understand that week 1 historically is the most important week of the waiver wire in all of fantasy football because we learn a lot about offenses usage. Juwan Johnson's usage was elite in week 1. That wasn't a fluke. That dude played 99% of the offensive snaps. Okay. Their head coach, Kellen Moore, wants him on the football field. And New Orleans offense, not good. But in terms of target competition, it's Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. He's fine. Brandon Cooks is getting up there in age. They traded for Devon Vele. I get that. Alvin Kamara is still around. But Juwan Johnson had 11 targets in week 1?
Yeah.
And he was on the field 99% of the time. Like, he's here. That's no fluke. I'm going Fannin. That 49ers Saints game is probably going to be really ugly. The Saints shouldn't have to throw as much this week as they did last week. Juwan Johnson's great, but Fannin could get you 12 plus targets in this game. If Flacco has to throw it 45, 50 times, I missed it. Was that a PPR?
It was on or did that it say? Comment. It didn't say.
Okay. So if it's PPR for sure, Fannin, but either way, I'm going Fannin. So it doesn't matter.
We also had Nathan K asking that question. So appreciate you guys.
Oh, nice.
Popping
Cool.
in there.
2 birds.
Look, we had a lot of comments here, but guys, you can answer this all yourselves too, right here with the week winner down at wap.com /BBFF. And like you said, the banner here, promo code $5 off per month using the promo code YouTube, all in caps. Only 3 available though. So if you guys haven't signed up and go get your resource today, $5 per month, as long as you're a subscriber to Basement Brood. So
yeah. And 100%. And if you want to share the screen here real quick, Tanner, we do have a very active, especially on Sunday mornings, a start sit channel inside of the Discord server. So what was I trying to get at? Oh yeah. So anyway, if I didn't get a chance to answer your question, we're always hanging out in the Discord server, talking ball, answering questions, all kinds of channels in here, but there's a very active start sit channel where you can come in, ask your question, get real feedback from the community, which by the way, the community I'm very strict about, or I'm very, I have one rule in my Discord server. It's be a good human being. Don't be a a-hole. Don't be a D word. Like, be a good human being, and you're allowed in our Discord server. And everybody that's in here plays fantasy football. So you're workshopping your dilemmas with 116 plus other fantasy football brains. And all of this is part of membership, by the way. Like, this isn't, we've been talking a lot about the week winner. And when you enter this promo code, you get the week winner. That's just part of it. You get access to the Discord server during the draft season. You get my draft dominator. You get access to my waiver wire winner, my touchdown regression analysis, my streamer cheat sheet. Oh, and by the way, every single month I do a monthly autographed jersey giveaway, courtesy of our sponsors, BS Collectibles. So every single month, if you win our contest, win our competition, you give me a list of jerseys, autographed jerseys you would like to acquire, and I go get one for you. And I send it to you. No cost, no questions asked. It's just something I do as a way of giving back to my members and saying thank you for supporting my small business, Basement Brood Fantasy Football. So if you want to join the family, I'm biased, but I do highly recommend it. If you don't want to hear it from me, look at the website. There's testimonials all over the place of people who have supported the mission, supported the business. Can't thank them enough. Can't thank you enough for tuning in. But wap.com/BBFF. There's a link for you in the show notes. First 3 people that use promo code YouTube, all caps, $5 off every month for as long as you're subscribed to the family. But
heck of a deal.
That's all we got. Should we button it up here? T-Money, T-Dog.
Let's button it up here, man. Hey, there's so many things. We appreciate everybody commenting in. Sorry we get to everybody's comments, but hopefully you learned a lot. You got what you needed out of that to be able to make your decisions here as we went over game script and everything else like that. So,
yep.
Till next week, guys. Till next week.
And we, me and Tanner are planning on doing this every week. We have not quite yet locked down a set like day and time. I think that's coming. I think we're going to come up with every this day at this time, but just know we are going to do a show next week. It's either going to be Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. There will be a show. So go ahead and keep it locked onto the Basement Brood Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Tanner and I are on a mission to get to 1,000 subscribers. Yes. And last I checked, we have like 120 left to go. It costs you nothing to slap that subscribe button, but you'd help out a small business a ton. So
also stay tuned throughout the week as the video preview pops in, and that's going to be your date. If you hit the notify me, it reminds you when we go live. So
smart. Very, very smart. So that's all we got for you guys today. This was episode 64 of Inside the 20 Basement Brood Fantasy Football. You can find Tanner. I always forget your Twitter handle. Where can people find you on Twitter? And is that where you hang out the most?
That is where I hang out the most, at tan12489. You can find me there right on X. That's my popular spot there. I enjoy hanging out. So
awesome. Other than that, guys, my most common spot to hang out, believe it or not, is LinkedIn. Of all places, connect with me on LinkedIn. Mikey Henninger. I'm trying to be the fantasy football guy over on LinkedIn. It's not, if you haven't been on LinkedIn in a long time, it's not what it used to be. It's not a bunch of people sharing their resume and trying to find a job. It's very much a content platform. And I'm posting about fantasy football quite literally every single day on LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn, Mikey Henninger. Join the Basement Brood Fantasy Football family. Sign up for the newsletter. All of the things. And until next weekend, we will see you guys on the fantasy football field. Mikey Henninger, Tanner Dawson, cheers. This brew's for you.